Welcome to Milestone Moments, the show where we explore the journeys that lead to success. I'm Sheila Slick, your host and founder of 5 Milestones. In every episode, we will bring you insights from the minds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and experts who will share not just their expertise, but the milestone moments that have reshaped their journeys and led to significant achievements. So if you're looking for motivation, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and discover the milestones that mark the path to success. Welcome to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. I'm your host, Sheila Slick, and my special guest today is Joseph Bolton. He's been an Army officer, space operations specialist, a combat veteran, a math teacher, and is author of Old Grandmother's Tree, a series of books. Joseph's rich heritage spans French-Canadian, Native American, Spanish, English, and Irish roots, which inspired him to pick up a pen and preserve his heritage. Welcome to the show, Joseph.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy to be here today.
Did I get that correctly?
You did. You did get it right. So, it inspired me. What started this, I think as a child, I was always very inquisitive about where we came from. And I would ask my grandparents questions, especially about Quebec, where they came from. And my aunts, my grandfather's sisters as well, and would hear stories about my grandfather and his siblings going out to visit the old family farm and their cousins in Quebec. My grandmother tells stories about her parents didn't have any children, and they went to Saint Anne de Beaupré Shrine up in Quebec City and prayed for a child. And the story is that my great grandmother came back expecting her first child on that trip. So I was very much inspired, but of course, growing up, in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have the tools that we do today to research your family history. So it was kind of a dark cloud, but I had a sense that there was something really important behind that kind of veil. And then, more recently, of course, with tools like ancestry.com and DNA tests, it really opened up the door to discover my ancestors. And one of all those ancestors in Quebec, the one that really inspired me was an Algonquin woman. Her name was Mirimete Ouagwe, and she lived in the mid-1600s in Quebec to the end of the 1600s. And her life just had turned out to be very well documented by the Jesuits who lived in Trois-Rivières. And her story kind of begins in 1652. She was married to an Algonquin husband also. His name was Asababish. She was 22. They had 2 small children, a boy and a girl. And one morning, Mohawk, another indigenous tribe from New York, came up. They attacked her village, and in that attack, her husband was killed, and her 2 small children were taken from her. And she never saw them again and never knew what happened to her. It was an open question for the rest of her life. 5 years later, she married a French settler named Pierre Cauque, and Pierre and Mirimete Ouagwe became my ancestors, and not only my ancestor, but the ancestor of thousands of French Canadians in Canada and the United States. So she has a very important part of a history of Canada. And the other part that really inspired me about her life, so she starts off at 22, which is barely out of her teens, and she loses everything. So go ahead towards the very end of her life, when she died in January of 1699, she was 68. And the priest in Trois-Rivières wrote about her. He wrote this very brief eulogy in his notes. And he said, Mirimete Ouagwe lived a full life with dignity, respect, and love, a courageous and loving Algonquin woman. And it's such a beautiful eulogy, and it's probably the most effective one I think was ever written. If a life could be summed up in just 2 lines like that, and at the end of our life, if someone can stand up and say, we lived a life of dignity, respect, and love and courage, we have lived well. And so between those events, when she was 22 years old, she lost her first family. At the very end, with this priest kind of lauds her as being, a strong, inspiring member of the community and very respected. And imagine this also, she's not only a woman, this is end of the 17th century. So women don't have the highest status. So right off the bat, her status is a little bit lower. But then she's also an indigenous native woman. So it's even lower, even higher of a bar for her to get up to have something written, be noticed that way. So between those two events, I figured there has to be a great story in there. And so that led to the creation of Old Grandmother's Tree. And, I would say that other people who have notable ancestors have written historical fiction about them. And this is a little different. So I have taken real facts of her life, the end of her life in 1699 and the attack that happened, but I retold her story in the language of a folktale. So in this reimagined old Quebec that she and her family and her descendants live in, there are Native American inspired trickster animal characters that live throughout the story. They're kind of immortal, so they're always there in other stories, even throughout time. And there's a little bit of magic. And so I chose that as a narrative language because folk tales are universal in every culture. And so when you read it, even though the stories are original, you will say, this feels familiar because it's a very deep language, because folk tales talk about the human experience and how to live well within the world that you're existing in, whatever culture or place you are. One of the magics of what we developed the story is that you can pick any volume of the book up and pick any story and read it, and the story will stand on its own. But as you read any of the stories in any order that you want, it's like putting pieces of a mosaic on a wall. A much bigger and grander story will emerge.
Have you experimented in doing clips or turning certain scenes into
I
video?
would well, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. This series of books is ready made to be created into like a streaming TV show, like on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, or Netflix. It's all ready to go. You have these stories. They're a collection of stories. They're interrelated characters, so it'd be very episodic. You have all these illustrations, which makes it very easy because it's already storyboarded for somebody to create this into either a film or a show, reoccurring show. And I also think it's very entertaining. It is, and a lot of people who read these books, just because they're illustrated, it means they're meant for little children. A lot of adults read these books and really enjoy them. And they also enjoy reading them, and sharing them with their children and grandchildren as well. So it's ready to go. It's entertaining. It's very positive and inspiring. It's not, the morals of the story don't hit you over the head, but they're there and it's ready to go. And so I've had people tell me that it's going to happen. And I'm going to say, yes, I think it's going to happen. I don't know when, but it will.
I think so, and you also have that teacher background, and so I'm
Mhm.
sure that you have lessons within all of this creativity, and I absolutely love how you incorporated her heritage, your culture, your family,
Mhm.
but then you also, morph them into different types of characters, right? Like, even
Yes.
the animals. So, how did you grow, or what did you learn while you've been creating all these books?
One is I love storytelling and creating stories. The other part is that trying to do this, and especially if you're going to create a book, that if you're going to do it and you're going to do it right, if you're going to do it, put out a quality product and not just throw something out there, then it's going to take thousands of hours of work and it's going to take a lot of money. You're going to have to invest. It's something that in theory you could do yourself, but you really can't do it well by yourself. You need help, and that will cost money. The illustration process in itself was very expensive because I have to pay the artist up front. I can't like have them work on spec because I have to live, on their art in their own careers. So that is one part of it. And I think so that's part of the biggest thing I learned from that was this is a lot more work than I ever thought. But having experienced this creative process, it's very interesting how when I've talked to other writers, how they all have different ways of doing it. Some people write outlines. Myself, I see a story in my mind as a movie, plays out over and over again, it kind of replays, and it changes a little bit, change things around until it's ready to go, and then I sit in front of the computer and I type it all out, and I got a good draft. So everybody has a different process. But the other aspect I kind of is interesting is that characters live within yourself. If you're a writer and you imbue your characters with a sense of life and their own personalities, you realize that they have kind of an independent existence within yourself. So when you put them in other stories, you don't really tell them what to do. You really create the setting and they do what they're going to do. And you just write down what you see them do. And so that's some of the things I've learned about the creative process.
You also offer speaking engagements. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I do a lot of podcasts internationally, some of them in Canada, some of the United States. I was recently had an article just recently published in a Magog, Quebec newspaper. And I was also recently interviewed by an established journalist from the Toronto Globe and Mail. So hopefully there'll be an article about the books. So I do a lot of that, the books, but a lot of that work, because there's so many other books and products out there you're competing for attention. I do a lot of footwork. In fact, even tonight, I was invited as a guest speaker for a French Canadian club in a city just south of me in Worcester tonight. I'm going to be doing a guest speaking at two other festivals, French Canadian festivals in New England, later this month. And, I do a lot of traveling. I've gone up to Pembroke, Ontario, where there are Algonquin communities and introduced the book to them, which they really like and love. I've gotten the books into libraries in Quebec and also Pembroke, Ontario. So you have to do a lot of promotion on your own because putting the book on Amazon is not going to make it sell. You have to put the effort in.
But I love how you are also spreading the message and sharing the story in all these different places. I had seen here on your website, which would you like to share the website? How can we learn more about you? Book
Oh, yes.
you.
Yes. So the website, I really recommend that everyone take a look at it. It's oldgrandmotherstree.com. It's written as one word, oldgrandmotherstree.com, no apostrophe in there. And in there, you will find my biography. You'll find a biography of Natasha Pelly-Smith. She's the Toronto-based artist who did all these beautiful illustrations. You'll find a quick summary of each of the books. There is a mosaic we created with just a small sample of some of the illustrations that are in there, and you can take a look at that. And there's also a character Wikipedia, and it talks about all the different settings and different characters. But if you're wondering, if you want to get a sense of what the stories are about before you order the books, the character Wikipedia is be a fun place to explore because you get to see these characters and learn some kind of interesting things about them. In fact, some details are in the Wikipedia that are not in the stories themselves. So you can look at that as well. There's also other original documentation, assessment about Mirimete Ouagwe. It's more of like a assessment about, where the information came from that helped me to discover her story. That's there too. So it's a very busy website and it's a fun place to explore. And there's also links where you can buy the books on Amazon, and they're available in French as well as English.
Before we wrap it up, I want you to share what would you say is one of the best morals of one of the stories that you have in your books?
I think my favorite chapter of the whole book, it's on page 129 in volume 2 of the second book. But in that, Uncle McKeish the turtle, riding the back of his nephew Poku the moose, are heading home back to Mount Orford in Quebec, walking on a trail. talking to each other. And while they're talking, Uncle McKeish is feeling being older, a much older person is feeling down on himself. He's telling, oh, I did terrible in these adventures. All I do is get into trouble, mischief for you to get me out of. And he goes back and forth with the nephew. The nephew's always very positive. And Uncle McKeish says, you must get tired of me. I repeat all my stories. And the nephew, Poku the Moose, says, oh, no, I learned something new with every retelling. And at the very end, when McKeish is just fed up, he says, why won't you let me, feel some self-pity here? Because he's feeling down on himself. And the nephew Moose says, Uncle McKeish, I'm not going to let you do that. And he says, if it wasn't for you, all the people right after the great ice had melted, if you weren't there with your brother teaching them how to live, they never would have survived. And he says that I don't care if you weren't able to do this, that, and the other thing on our adventure. The important thing is you are the best uncle to me, and I love you. And so that conversation to me is one of the real hearts of the book about family and relationships and listening to your elders and valuing your elders and that relationship that transcends generations. And I think that is probably my favorite chapter of all the stories of the books. And there's a lot of good chapters in there, but that would be the one that probably has like the heart of what the books are about.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your books and your story and your heritage with us today, Joseph.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. Until next time.